The house was full of noise, laughter, clinking dishes, the kind of cheerful chaos that used to warm my heart. Every year I dreamed of nights like this, where all my children and grandchildren would gather under one roof, eating the food I had spent hours preparing. At 67, my hands weren't as steady as they once were. My knees ached when I stood too long, and my back reminded me of my age every time I leaned over the stove. But the effort never bothered me. Cooking for my family was my love language. It was the one thing that made me feel connected to them. Tonight should have been perfect, but fate seems to enjoy reminding me that perfect things break the easiest. We were all seated around the table, 12 of us in total. The smell of roasted lamb and warm bread filled the room. I felt proud watching them enjoy the meal, even if half of them barely looked in my direction. I was telling a small story, nothing extraordinary, just a memory from my youth about how I learned to sew with scraps of fabric because we couldn't afford proper cloth. I thought it might inspire the grandchildren, teach them a small lesson about resilience. But before I could finish my sentence, my 16-year-old granddaughter, Mia, sighed dramatically and said loudly, "Grandma, seriously, nobody cares. You're literally a nobody." Her words hit me like a blow to the chest. For a moment, everything froze. My fork slipped from my fingers and hit the plate with a sharp clang. I looked around the table expecting anyone, to correct her, to defend me, to at least look ashamed. But instead they laughed. My daughter-in-law snorted. My son shook his head with a smirk. Even my younger grandchildren giggled because everyone else was. I felt my cheeks burn, but not from embarrassment, from heartbreak. I had raised these people, fed them, sacrificed for them, stayed awake through sick nights, worked extra shifts, and sold jewelry when they needed money. I had been their backbone, their safety net, their unconditional love. Yet in that moment, to them, I was just a joke. I swallowed hard, forcing the ache in my throat down. "Well," I whispered, "I didn't mean to bore anyone. No one even heard me." Mia was on her phone again. My children were deep in their own conversations. I was invisible, sitting at the same table as the people I loved most, yet completely unseen. After dinner, I cleared the plates alone. No one offered to help. They had all gone to the living room to laugh, watch TV, and enjoy the rest of the night. I stood at the sink, hands submerged in warm water, tears dropping silently into the soap bubbles. My reflection in the window looked older than ever, tired, small, and painfully lonely. When the dishes were finally done, I walked quietly down the hall to my room and shut the door. The sound of their laughter bled through the walls, each burst another reminder of how little I mattered to them. I sat on the edge of my bed and let myself cry, not just from the insult, but from years of small wounds I had ignored. Years of being overlooked, undervalued, and used. Years of giving everything and receiving crumbs. Tonight wasn't the first time they dismissed me. But it was the first time I believed it. A nobody. That's what they saw when they looked at me. But as the tears dried on my cheeks, a strange calm settled over me. If I was a nobody to them, then I no longer owed them the pieces of myself I kept giving. Something quiet and powerful awakened inside me, a decision that would change all of our lives. Tomorrow morning, they would learn exactly who this nobody truly was. I woke early the next morning, long before the sun rose. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the laughter that had filled it the night before. My pillow was still damp from tears, but something inside me felt sharper, clearer. I sat at the small wooden desk by the window, the same desk I had owned since my 20s. I pulled open the drawer and took out a bundle of papers tied with an old ribbon. My hands trembled, not from age, but from the gravity of what I was about to do. These papers held a life my family never cared to ask about. They knew me as the quiet grandmother who cooked, cleaned, and stayed out of trouble, the woman who always said yes, who never raised her voice, who forgave everything. The woman they could ignore because she would still be there tomorrow. But there was another version of me, one they never bothered to understand. My late husband and I built a tailoring business from scratch. I handled the books, the clients, the employees. When he fell sick in his later years, I ran everything alone. After he passed, I sold the business and invested the money. Not once did my children ask how I survived financially. They assumed I was dependent on them, perhaps because it made them feel important. But the truth, I had more than enough, more than they ever imagined. A sudden knock jolted me from my thoughts. It wasn't a person, it was my phone vibrating, a message from my son. "Morning, Mom. Don't forget Mia's school fees are due next week. No thank you. No sorry about last night." Just another bill handed to the nobody. The silence that followed was heavy but empowering. I stood, took a deep breath, and walked to my wardrobe. On the top shelf was a small lockbox. Inside were documents my family didn't even know existed: property papers, certificates, investment summaries, and my original will. A will that included all of them, a will based on love they never returned. I placed it all into my handbag and grabbed my coat. The morning air was cold, wrapping around me like a warning and a promise. I walked to the bus stop, each step lighter than the last. At my age, people expect you to slow down, to depend on others. But I felt stronger than I had in years. Strong enough to make a decision that would reshape the future. When I arrived at Mr. Cartwright's office, my lawyer for 18 years, he looked up and smiled kindly. "Mrs. Harris," he said softly, "I've been expecting you." Of course he had. He was the only one who had bothered to know the real me. I sat across from him, placed the documents on the table, and said, "It's time to finalize everything." He nodded. "Are you sure? This will change everything for your family." I held his gaze, remembering the laughter at the dinner table, the cruel sparkle in my granddaughter's eyes, the way everyone dismissed me like I was dust in the wind. "Yes," I said firmly, "they made their choice last night. Now I'm making mine." We spent the next hour reviewing papers. My estate would no longer go to my children or grandchildren. Every property, every investment, every savings account, redirected. Instead, the inheritance would go to my late friend Clara's struggling orphanage, which always needed help. My young caregiver, Lily, who had shown me more kindness than my own family in years, and a small trust fund supporting elderly women abandoned by their families. Not a cent for the ones who laughed. When we finished, I signed my name. The pen glided smoothly across the paper, sealing a fate my family would never expect. Mr. Cartwright closed the folder gently. "It's done." I exhaled deeply, as if releasing years of pain. "They think I'm a nobody," I whispered, "but by tomorrow they'll know exactly who I am." As I left his office, the sun was rising, lighting the sky in warm streaks of gold. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. And my family had no idea what was coming. The sun had barely begun to touch the windows when I quietly finished packing the last of my belongings. Just 2 suitcases, one with clothes, the other with memories that still mattered. Everything else in the house belonged to them, or at least they believed it did. I moved silently through the dim hallway, listening to the muffled snoring and restless shifting of the people who had broken me only the night before, the same people who would soon learn what it meant to underestimate a woman they believed was powerless. Before leaving, I walked to the kitchen. On the table, I placed a simple white envelope with a single word written neatly across it: family. Inside was a letter not full of anger or accusations, but truth, a truth they had ignored for too long. "I am not a nobody. I am simply nobody to those who do not value me. By the time you read this, I will be gone. There will be no return, no discussion, no forgiveness. What happens next is what you taught me. We only care for those who care back. I placed my spare house keys beside the envelope. Then I left. The morning air was cold, biting at my cheeks, but it felt refreshing like the first breath after escaping a closed room. A taxi arrived right on time, and as I settled into the back seat, I looked at the house through the window for one last time. That house had never truly been mine. It had been a place where I served, not lived. A place where my love was taken, not returned. As the taxi pulled away, I felt no regret, only relief. Back at the house, it was past 9 a.m. when my granddaughter Mia stumbled into the kitchen, yawning and scrolling through her phone. She saw the envelope but ignored it at first. Instead, she poured herself cereal and sat down with her feet on the chair, just as she always did, despite my many attempts to teach her manners. When she finally opened the envelope, her careless expression shifted. Her eyebrows pulled together. Her lips tightened. Something ugly flashed across her face. "Mom," she shouted, "come here. Grandma left some weird note." Soon, the entire family crowded into the kitchen, each reading the letter, their expressions darkening with every sentence. My daughter-in-law scoffed. "This is ridiculous. She's being dramatic." My son, however, looked uneasy. "What does she mean by the time you read this? Where did she go?" No one knew. No one had even bothered to check my room. When they finally did, the panic truly began. Her closet is half empty. Her shoes are gone. Her handbags are missing. "She actually left," my son whispered, as if the idea itself was unthinkable. My daughter-in-law grabbed her phone. "Call her, she'll pick up." But I didn't. My phone had been turned off since sunrise. Frustration quickly turned into fear. Fear into confusion. Confusion into something they rarely felt: guilt. Why would she do this? Mia muttered softly, almost to herself. My son ran a hand through his hair. "Because she felt disrespected. Mia, you said some awful things last night." Mia crossed her arms defensively. "It was a joke." Everyone laughed. "And that's the problem," he snapped back. Their voices rose, echoing through the halls. Accusations, defensiveness, regret they didn't want to admit, but the greatest shock had yet to come. Around noon, the doorbell rang. When my son opened it, there stood Mr. Cartwright, my lawyer, holding a thick folder and an envelope. "I'm here regarding Mrs. Harris," he said. Their faces drained of color. He sat with them in the living room, his tone firm and professional as he explained. "I had left permanently. I no longer wished to be contacted, and most importantly, my will had been rewritten." My daughter-in-law leaned forward anxiously. "Rewritten how?" Mr. Cartwright opened the folder. "All previous beneficiaries have been removed." Silence fell like a heavy stone. Mia blinked rapidly. "Removed as in reduced?" "No," the lawyer replied calmly. "Removed." My son's face turned red. "But she's our mother. We've always been there for her." Mr. Cartwright raised an eyebrow. "Have you?" That question sank into the room like ice water. Then he continued, "Mrs. Harris's entire estate has been reassigned. None of you are included. Not a single property, investment, or savings account remains in your names." My daughter-in-law gasped. "This can't be legal." "It's perfectly legal," he said, "and her decision is final." Their world crumbled in that moment. They had mocked the woman who held their security in her hands. They had laughed at the one person who still loved them unconditionally. And now they were left with nothing but the echo of their own cruelty. The room filled with regret that arrived far too late. And somewhere far away, in a place they no longer had access to, I finally felt peace. Tomorrow, they would feel the full weight of what it meant to lose me. But today was just the beginning. The next morning, I walked into the house with a calmness none of them expected. My family gathered slowly, their expressions uneasy after the chaos of the previous night. No one joked. No one whispered. They only watched. I placed a thin folder on the table. "What's that?" my son asked carefully. "Something you never bothered to learn about me," I said. Inside were the documents, property deeds, charity ownership records, and financial statements. My daughter-in-law's mouth fell open. Amna's confidence cracked instantly.